On this Wednesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, we're not going to trick you into thinking the Grizzlies can acquire Kevin Durant or LeBron James or Steph Curry. No, we are going to move forward and review the season that was, starting with the key Grizzlies cog, Ja Morant. Because Damichael Cole, I don't know if you know this or not, but you know what my favorite month of the year is?
What's your favorite month of the year, Joe?
It's gonna be May. We're starting it the strong way on Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh my God, did they get Justin Timberlake to be the co-host for the first episode in May of Locked On Grizzlies? No, you silly banana. It's me, Joe Mullinax, your co-host for Locked On Grizzlies, joined by Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer. I'm sorry to disappoint you if you thought the JT was here on the show. Maybe
we got JM for you.
We got JM instead.
But we got JM in the building.
Got to go up a few letters in the alphabet to get to that. But sorry for the trickery. I know I pulled the okie doke. Yes, I do have a lovely voice. Thank you for thinking that or saying that, letting me know in the comments here on Locked On Grizzlies as we start the month of May together. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Big fan of FanDuel. Hopefully you are as well. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We here at Locked On Grizzlies are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. However you get your podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Make us a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption. As we told you on Monday's show, we were taking a breather to close out the month of April, but we're going to hit it hard to start May. 3 episodes back-to-back to close out the week, and this first episode is going to be our player review of Ja Morant. And as I alluded to in our open there, Damichael, you and I talk about what we want to do on the show every day, and we could go the clickbaity route. But how could they get Kevin Durant, right? He seems unhappy in Phoenix that the wheels are falling off. LeBron James, maybe if Memphis agrees to draft Bronny, how can they get that done? It's not possible, okay? At least not without trading one of the 3 guys we're going to talk about this week in Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, or Jaren Jackson Jr., and that kind of defeats the purpose of such a trade. So we're not going to defeat your intelligence or insult your intelligence here on Locked On Grizzlies. We are going to focus on the 3 stars that Memphis already has. And we're going to start off with the biggest star of them all, Ja Morant. And we're going to start positive here, partner. I think that's important because there's room for growth, right? There's room for growth with all of us on this planet that walk this globe as we speak. There's room for all of us to get better. Ja Morant's no different. But I do want to start positive. I think that's important. And for me, partner, I know you're going to talk more the macro view of Ja Morant's return. Seeing him come back against the New Orleans Pelicans, lead the team to a victory, a clutch showing, reminding everyone exactly who he is and what he can be. There's been lots of talk of Anthony Edwards and all the great work that he's doing in Minnesota. He is a phenomenal player, and I don't want to degrade anything that Edwards has done in these playoffs. I think talking about the playoffs a few episodes ago, I said I want to see them win a playoff series. Well, here we are, right? They've won a playoff series, the Timberwolves have, and going into a pretty big fight.
They're calling him the face of the league now.
They are, and that might be a good topic for a future episode of Locked On.
It definitely is. It definitely is.
Respect to the Timberwolves. They won, and they are currently on that run, enjoying some of that Grizzlies juju from the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Ja Morant in that individual game, and again, like I said, I think you're going to talk more about the overall sample size. It was a reminder of what the Grizzlies can be and will be again with Ja in the fold, because the Grizzlies were pretty bad during that 25-game suspension to start the season. We'll talk more about that later in the program. They were not a particularly good basketball team. Ja Morant's return reminded us all of what this team can be when Morant is on the floor. And that's a playoff team to be reckoned with in the Western Conference.
Yeah, exactly. When you think about the big picture here, the reason we can go into this off season and confidently, like me and you. I did the Charles Barkley guarantee on your, the other day. I guarantee that this team will be back in the playoff hunt. And the reason we can say those type of things is because of what we saw in that small stretch when you talk about the best of Ja Morant. He only played 9 games, but the Grizzlies were 6-3 in that stretch. Not only were they 6-3, but you had wins, 2 wins over the Pelicans in that stretch, as well as a win against the Lakers, which at the time that was a charging Lakers team, a team that, again, we were talking about the Grizzlies kind of catching. They were under 500 too, but you knew, they were about to try to turn the corner. They were in. The Grizzlies put it on them. Like the Grizzlies put it on them that game. I remember, I think the Grizzlies had 4 players score over 20 points in that game. I think Ja, Marcus, Dez, and Jaren all top 20 points. So the best of Ja Morant, that's what stood out to me. But on a bigger picture, because we know what he's capable of. He's going to get on the court, do his thing, and we never really got to see him at quote unquote 100% at his best, as he liked to put it. I remember in the days before he injured his shoulder and whatnot, he was telling us how I'm not all the way quite back yet. I'm getting there, but I'm about 75, 80%, things like that. So to me, it's simple. Ja Morant being on the floor for as little time as it still instilled the confidence in what we already knew, because the Grizzlies were so bad at the beginning, 6-19. It was fair to wonder. I mean, people were wondering, man, can Ja Morant fix this? I think we talked about it, but it was a legit question. Like, is Ja Morant enough to fix this? And man, when I tell you, that was as obvious to me what his impact is as it's ever been, with him being on this Grizzlies team. Because usually when Tyus Jones was here, the Grizzlies were still really good, but they just played a different style. Like you noticed, when Ja gets back, it's going to be a little bit more pick and roll. They're going to run a little bit faster. The ball isn't going to touch everyone's hands as much and whatnot, but you're going to get more paint points. You're going to get more pressure on the rim, things like that, more driving kicks. And then, of course, it was different with Tyus. But I think seeing Ja in the lineup for that stretch that we saw, it was only 9 games. It really was just like a little tease. It's like, to me, it's like when you're in the street and you see the girl walking by and you barely get
partner, we're a family show now. We're a family show here on Locked On Grizzlies.
Oh man, she's so pretty, but you only get a glimpse of her. Yeah, I'm not going to say too much more than that because we are a family show. But with all that being said, that's what you got of Ja this year. He was just a little flash in the pan, but from what you saw, it was very good looking.
It was very good looking, and when it came to him getting to the paint, it wasn't just the tip in, right? That's not all that was happening with Ja Morant. It was also dishing out of the paint, finding open shooters in a Desmond Bane. The reality of this season, and it's probably going to be a theme as we go through these player reviews, partner, we never saw anybody except for that 9-game stretch. And even then, Brandon Clark wasn't there. Except for that 9-game stretch, you never really saw these guys in their ideal roles as it was constructed by Zach Kleiman in the front office, as it was envisioned by Taylor Jenkins and the coaching staff. Ja Morant's a major piece of that, right? And I do think that, again, the idea of these trades for LeBron or Kevin Durant, the only way it could ever work financially is to start with trading away one of Ja, Bane, or Jaren. And as I alluded to earlier, that eventually defeats the purpose. If you wanted to make an argument as to who you're going to trade, given how much they missed him this year, it'd be fairly easy to argue for trading away Ja Morant if that's what you wanted to do, which I want to stress, that's not what I want to do.
That's not what you want.
I don't need anybody screaming at me in the comments
make it clear,
saying I wanted to trade Ja. I don't want to trade Ja. That is my point. And that is the reason why acquiring a player like that, whether it's smart basketball-wise or not, we don't need to debate because it's not going to happen. But the reality of the situation is, in terms of the way that this season played out, Ja Morant being the one in those hypothetical never going to happen circumstances that maybe would need to be tagged in those deals. And it's not worth it. That to me is something that was driven home, whether it's his trade value being lower than it's ever been, which we'll talk more about here in a moment, whether it's the reality of what he means to this team and the city, this organization, the way the fans rallied behind him. There's a lot of good to come out of the bad that Ja had happened to him and the Grizzlies by proxy this past season. And one of those things is, like you said, that brief snippet, that brief tease, that smackerel of what's to come when this team is trying to compete. Because nobody will ever be able to convince me, if Ja Morant stayed healthy, that the Grizzlies aren't in the playoffs. Now, maybe they lose in the first round. Maybe it's them instead of the Lakers getting swept, or gentlemen swept in 5. Or maybe it's them instead of the Thunder, and it's a competitive series, whatever the case might be.
Right.
No one's going to be able to convince me that the Grizzlies wouldn't have made it. They would have made it. And Ja Morant's smackerel of a season, those 9 games, drive that point home. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, partner. And we do need to take a turn down to negative town here momentarily here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get there, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the good folks over at DoorDash. Love me some DoorDash. If you want to make mom smile, if you want to start Mother's Day the right way, send her flowers, surprise her with gifts from the brand she loves, delivered the very same day with DoorDash. Flowers with a gift card. She can celebrate any way she wants. That sounds like a nice way to do it. Maybe she's a bookworm, loves reading, partner. Get a bookstore gift card would be a great way to reward her for all that she does for you and yours. Maybe she loves a good latte. Maybe she deserves a little more of a thoughtful gift that you can do a little more research on. So many different possibilities over at DoorDash. Order now and get everything you need for Mother's Day on DoorDash. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order right now on DoorDash. That is Locked On NBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by FanDuel. It is winner take all time in both the NBA and NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Go visit FanDuel.com right now, FanDuel.com/LockedOn, and make every playoff shot count. Again, FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Be a part of the playoff excitement with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Big fan of FanDuel. All right, Damichael, so we were positive early in the show. We talked about the clear impact that Ja's presence had on this team this season. But again, we've talked about it here, there, and everywhere on Locked On Grizzlies. Sometimes in life, the greatest ability is availability. And for me, as I take that turn down negative town, Ja fell short as a leader for this organization, right? The second suspension, not necessarily learning or, clearly understanding what was wrong the first time around, embarrassing the league, embarrassing Adam Silver. And this is certainly not going to be an argument for Adam Silver. If you're an everydayer here at Locked On Grizzlies, you've heard me say Adam Silver is the worst commissioner in sports. I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that. And I want to stress that is my take, not Damichael's take. That is a Joe Mullinax take here on May 1st. And it's going to continue to be my take because I think at some point a commissioner shouldn't be as beloved by the players as he is. There has to be some form of structure there. And Damichael almost certainly disagrees with that, and that's fine. But to embarrass Adam Silver, to make it so that the team is without you, to have that cloud hovering over you, all the negative publicity that came out of that, you certainly can't blame all of this season on Ja because that's not fair. It's not his fault that he got hurt, much less that all the other players got hurt. All that is true. But the fact that Oklahoma City, doing a lot of the same things that the Memphis Grizzlies had done the last couple of years, the interviews that are fun at the end of games and the celebrations in the locker room. It was a remix edition of the Grizzlies circa 2022 through 2023. Okay, so a lot of that has to coincide and connect with those fateful decisions that were made in Denver, the subsequent suspension, the video online on Instagram Live that led to the larger suspension. It did not help that the player who is so significant, you can't have it both ways. You can't be the guy that matters so much to winning. And then when you, for reasons that are completely your fault, are not there for your team, for me, it has to start there. You can talk about on-the-court production, not making threes, poor defense. There's areas that you can tweak and discuss. But for me, Damichael, it starts with the leader of your franchise, the cornerstone of your organization, not being there when the team needed him most. Not because of injury, but because of his own mistakes. Hopefully he's learned from it, but that's the low point for Ja for me.
Yeah. There was an availability thing there when you talk about Ja this past season. 9 games played, 6-19. The Grizzlies started without him, as we said earlier, and even in that stretch, he was around, and you could kind of see it on his face, in certain ways. Like he tried to help out in whatever ways he could, but at the end of the day, if you're not in between those lines in the 48 minutes, it's going to show. And he wasn't, and it showed. So that was, I guess, you're right from the availability standpoint. I'm going to go in a different direction on the floor, and it's the 3-point shooting. And quite frankly, let me be the first to say that even if he would have shot it well, like 55% from 3-point range in those 9 games and only played 9 games, I still wouldn't have been convinced, because I've seen Ja have those stretches. You go to the beginning of last season, like before this season, the beginning of last season, Ja was hot from 3-point range. And there were people, in the Memphis media, like applauding, like, oh yeah, this is the year. Ja's, he looks, the 3-point shot looks refined. And I was one of those people like, let's wait a little bit now. And of course, as things can tend to do, they evened out and his numbers were pretty much around his career average. But this year, only 9 games, I still wanted to see him shoot the basketball better from 3-point range, to at least have the idea of maybe he has improved his shot or whatnot. This year, Ja took a career high of 5.7 3-point attempts per game in those 9 games, more willing to shoot it, but only shot 27.5% from 3-point range. And we talked about it yesterday. A couple days ago, Joe, this whole idea of Jaren at the 4, right? I think it is the best position for him, for this team to succeed going forward. But Ja is a big part of that. Ja can't shoot 30% from 3-point range. And you got Jaren in a center who's probably going to be a center who won't be shooting that many 3-pointers. Like, you need for Ja to make teams play when they go under those screens and they say, hey, we just stopped Ja at the rim. You need him to make those teams play. It doesn't have to be 38, 39%. You take a cool 35.5, 36% from 3-point range. You get that from Ja. That's enough, because he's going to score at the rim regardless. He's going to do that. And of course, in the playoffs, it'll get a little bit harder and all that. But he's just physically, he's just so physically gifted. He can get to the basket and just leap over dudes. And if you watch that Lakers series in the first round, it was kind of scary at times, Joe, because he'd just go flying with reckless abandon, a lot of times. And he'd make some. And sometimes, he came down hard on the hand in that series and whatnot. Like, you have moments like that as well. So I talked about the idea of, and maybe it's a growth in Ja Morant's game type thing, for our last segment, but he's already mentioned this, so I think we can throw it in this segment as well. I remember when that 9-game stretch, he was talking to me, Joe, about the idea that I'm not really going to try to dunk on dudes like that anymore, kind of preserving my body while I'm in the air. And, you felt like it was going to mean well for his health, and I think it will. But, I think that in order for him to play that brand of basketball, to be that guy who says, okay, I'm going to go to the rim and I'm just going to lay it in instead of trying to posterize dudes or fly through the air, he has to have a balance to that. He has to have a jumper, a 3-point shot that can balance that out. If he doesn't have the 3-point shot, he's going to have to go in there flying at the rim, because it's going to be 7-footers standing there waiting on him, and little layups aren't going to work.
At the very least, a mid-range shot, right? Like watching Jamal Murray there in that Game 5 put the Lakers to sleep.
Yeah.
It's something to make them, whether it's drop coverage,
Yep.
somebody playing under you on a screen, something to make them pay for it, right? Ideally, it would be a 3, because that's a more efficient shot. But, whether it's Murray, SGA, those types of guys that have that kind of level to their game, it would be good to see him add something similar. The floater isn't enough because, again, the floater is not necessarily an efficient shot. Finding a way to add that layer, even if it's not the 3-pointer, that would certainly be something to prioritize and something to grow in his game, which we'll talk about coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. What we want to see Ja Morant get better at over the summer. I believe you've reported to Michael he should be fully cleared by July-ish, I think you said. So if he's ready to go in July, that gives him a month and a half, right? About 6 to 8 weeks of a kind of training camp, kind of like a boxer or a fighter, that he can work on some skills. We'll talk about what we want to see from Ja next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, aside from me embarrassing myself with my Justin Timberlake impression, you haven't heard any yelling on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, right? That's because here, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day, Damichael and I are committed to giving you analysis, conversation, things to think about, things to make you go, more so than things to make you go, my ears, all that shouting. Locked On Sports Today is a great example of a place where you can find more of that. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day, bringing you the biggest stories without all that yelling. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off, timeout. We got to pause to talk even more about Monopoly Go. And again, we've talked about Monopoly Go a lot, right? That's one of our newest sponsors that we're discussing a good bit here on Locked On Grizzlies. But there's a ton of good stuff in this game. Teaming up with friends for time tournaments, working together to build up each other's boards, winning more together, teamwork making the dream work, awesome prizes being unlocked. You can use emojis for celebrating or taunting friends when you smash their buildings and betray their trust, have amazing new playing pieces traveling all through different boards with, and you can compete for big, big prizes. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing challenges and tournaments, and there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench, get in the game, download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. When we return here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will close out this episode taking a look at areas for Ja Morant to grow in the offseason on the floor. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, your host for this episode, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication, award-winning Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. This episode has been focused on Ja Morant. We've talked the good of Ja this past year, the not so good of Ja from the past year. And now we're going to prioritize things we want to see Morant get better at over the offseason. We mentioned earlier in the show, Damichael reporting and others reporting as well, the idea of Morant being cleared probably in the middle of July. That puts us at about 2.5 months, and he'll have 6 or 8 weeks to work on his game before training camp breaks. Damichael, I'm curious, well, you can most certainly get us started here, what you want to see from Ja. You talked a little bit about his three-point shooting there earlier in the program. In terms of watching his game, what are you most intrigued by with what he physically can improve at this stage? Is it still three-point shooting, even though we have a larger sample, not much larger, but still a larger sample that maybe that's just not his bag? Is there something else you want to see Morant kind of invest in this summer once he's cleared in terms of his health?
It's along those lines, actually. Even more so than the three-point shooting. How about effective three-level scoring ability? That's kind of what I want to see. We already touched on the three-point shooting. That's that. But it's more. I think when I say effective three-level scoring, I'm not just talking about him making three-point shots, him making mid-range shots, and him making shots around the rim. It's more to it than that. Desmond Bane is going to have the ball in his hands a little bit more going forward. Jaren Jackson Jr. showed that he's one of the better isolation scorers in the league. You know what that means? Ja's going to have to catch and shoot some. And part of being an effective three-level scorer is showing, hey, just like, when I'm playing pick and roll and I'm dribbling the basketball and I'm setting up the entire offense, there's a counter now. Like, teams have seen enough of that with the Grizzlies, and they know how to load up, and especially the great defenses. We saw the Lakers do it. We saw the Warriors do it. We saw the Timberwolves do it in the playoffs, all of those teams to success. Now, the thing is, there you have a Desmond Bane. You have a Jaren Jackson Jr. Ja, I think, Joe, is a really good cutter, but we haven't seen a lot of it because he's on the ball so much. We see it when he's in the game with Tyus Jones in the past, and that just hasn't happened a lot. But when I say effective three-level scoring, it's more so just the all-around game shining. Whether it's him becoming a better isolation scorer. We talked about Jaren's improvement as an isolation scorer. A lot of people don't remember, even last season, Jaren was the only player of the big three, Desmond Bane, Ja, and Jaren. He was the only one who rated above league average as an isolation scorer. So even though Ja would, score a lot of points, quote unquote, in those situations, he still struggled as a efficient isolation scorer. There were a lot of misses. We saw the Grizzlies' fourth quarter struggles a couple years ago, and it was a lot because when it comes to isolation times, teams load up against Ja. And Desmond Bane has said he's going to work on his, isolation scoring this year, as well as him being a better playmaker and things like that. Jaren's going to continue to work on his playmaking, and all of that will help the growth in Ja Morant's game. But from an individual standpoint, if I'm Ja Morant, I'm looking in the mirror and say, hey, I want teams to be like, how in the world do we stop Ja Morant this upcoming season? Right now, they say we just got to stop him from getting in the paint. They're not worried about the mid-range jumper, and they're not worried about the three-point jumper. Give them a little bit more to worry about. And we're talking about, we talk about face of the NBA and the whole Shai Gilgeous-Alexander talk, Anthony Edwards and all that. Ja can quiet all that if he adds some of those elements to his game.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that maybe next week. The idea of anybody other than Ja being that doesn't understand, the culture of basketball, which you do such a good job talking about over the commercial appeal, in addition to your great coverage of the team itself. Ja Morant is very much that figure if he can get back on the court consistently. I think that's, in my opinion, very clear. But we live in a very short-term memory society, 24/7 news cycle, partner. For me, I am of the mind that outside of his growth as a person, and I do think it's going to be wonderful to watch him travel with and help organize. You've mentioned his AAU team that he started, or his AAU program. He already seems happier in those settings, watching videos, seeing pictures. I think he's investing himself in a more productive way. He's putting energy in a positive direction with that, and I think that's wonderful. I think that's a really smart decision by him, and I hope he sticks with it over the summer. Seems like it's a legitimate investment, and it's something they're going to be passionate about. On the court, beyond all the off-the-court issues, I want to continue to see him get better as a defender, because I think that is a more tangible place where you can see growth. Now, I love your point, Damichael, because we saw improvement from Jaren as a facilitator and creator for others. Yeah. I'd love to see Ja off the ball more, slashing, cutting, alley-oops, those sorts of things. That's 100% I'm on board with. But I also think, given all that athleticism, the physical ability that Ja has, we saw flashes of it in that 9-game smackerel of a season. Yeah. He can defend when he wants to put his mind to it. And if the usage rate for Jaren is going to be higher because of the growth that he had this year, if the usage rate for a Desmond Bane is going to stay comparable, if Ja's going to play with Gigi Jackson, right? Now, obviously, he shouldn't take too many shots from Ja, but in order to maximize Gigi, he has to shoot the basketball. So I think as he adopts and evolves his game, it'll look more like he was early in his Grizzlies tenure, when his assists would be up in the first 3 quarters, and then he takes over offensively in the fourth, almost like a closer in baseball. I'd like to see those first 3 quarters be more defensively focused, not just highlight blocks, playing passing lanes, just good, solid, fundamental team-first scheme defense that we know Taylor Jenkins is good at, right? For all the criticisms of Jenkins that Grizzlies fans like to lay at his feet, he's very clearly a good defensive basketball coach. If Morant can use his 6'3" frame and the athleticism that he possesses to be a better team defender, I think that you'll see the efficiency of the Grizzlies improve naturally, because they'll be better on that end because of a net neutral to net positive defensive effort. I'm not asking him to be Marcus Smart. I'm not asking him to be Vince Williams Jr. I'm asking him to be a level below SGA, because you talked about him recently. He led the league in steals, that sort of thing. SGA came into the league as a very good defender.
For sure.
A good defender. And especially within the Grizzlies scheme, that's where I'd like to see some growth from Ja. So Damichael wants to see 3-level scoring development from Ja Morant. I am hopeful for some defensive growth. What say you, dear listener, dear viewer? Let us know in the comments. What do you want to see Ja improve at? Again, we've talked about the off-court stuff enough. In terms of his game in particular, what do you want to see? Let us know in the comments. The next time we're together, partner, it'll be our Thursday edition of the show. And let's stay in the backcourt. Let's stay with the perfect backcourt partner for a Ja Morant.
The yang to the
Desmond
yang,
Bane. Yeah, we'll talk about the good of Dez, the not so good of Dez, because even though he had a decent season, there are some things that weren't his best, probably similar to Ja in terms of that availability question, different type of question, but similar end game. And then ways that we want to see Bane grow. We'll keep this structure for the big three. I think it works.
Yeah, I like it. And yeah, we seen, have you seen the social media posts from those guys lately? Like, they're really buying into the idea that they are, a big three now, which is, I think it's important. Some people may not think nothing of it, or whatever the case may be, but I think it is very important for players on a team to stand up and say, you know what, we're the dogs. We're the guys that if this team is going to achieve its goals, we have to lead the way. And Jaren posted a picture of him, him, Ja, and Desmond Bane recently, and Ja just reposted the same picture of the three of them as well. And Dez is they commented on both of those pictures and whatnot. So like, they're very well aware of the idea that this team will go as far as those three guys goes. And I don't think that's always been the case, because they respected Dylan Brooks so much, for example, and Dylan was here longer than those guys. He was kind of viewed as a leader for a certain point of time. And then you had other guys who were here as long as them, like Kyle Anderson, Tyus Jones, the list goes on. And now, without a doubt, like, Jaren is the longest tenured. And then right behind Jaren, guys like Ja Morant came in. And then behind him, of course, along with Brandon Clark, Desmond Bane came the year after that. So they're the top dogs now. Like, they got to lead the way.
They have to lead the way. It's no longer an option. They are the leaders of the organization. Money talks, right? And all three of them are on pretty sizable contracts. It has to be them, because if it's not them, who the heck is it going to be? So we'll focus on Desmond Bane and areas for him to continue to grow, things that he shined doing on our Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much for being with us on this episode. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get podcasts. Make sure you're an everydayer. Every time an episode drops, check out Locked On Grizzlies, and we appreciate you making us a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption. Damichael and I will be back on Thursday. Until then, stay safe. Have a great Wednesday, Grizzlies fans. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, and make sure you're listening to some Justin Timberlake. It's gonna be May. See you next time.